Right, first we're going to make the bogies that go with the low loader. There's two types, there's 32mm and 45. We are going to build the 32mm this time. Both bogies are pretty much the same as each other, the only difference being the construction on top for the bearing surface going onto the actual low loader itself. All the parts are very similar, so we have to go through this quite carefully, otherwise we'll get them all muddled up. So start off by selecting 4 pieces with a circle drawn around them. They are handed. So we want 2 with a circle where the circle is bottom right and the little kick is to the left. And then you want a circle bottom left and the kick is to the right. So that's a pair and that's a pair. And then you select identical with no markings on at all. As you'll see, these are blank on both sides. So again, they pair up with each other. Then what we do is we take a ball race and we fit it on the marked side. He says dropping it right onto the marked side and then drop that onto its corresponding piece above. Do that for all 4. So that's what we've now done. Now what we're going to do is we're going to run some super glue around each bearing so that the bearing is actually glued to the piece of wood. And for this I use the thin super glue, which I put into my dispenser. I use a paper clip. And just run it around. You use the other piece of wood underneath because the bearing protrudes and we need it to be a good fit down onto its flange. So we don't glue the 2 pieces of wood together, the other one is purely used to keep the bearing up off the surface. It's important we don't glue the 2 pieces of wood together at the moment. So that's done that for the moment, so we'll now move on to the next section. Right, we're now going to assemble the underframes of one of the bogies. So if you find the parts that you can see now and lay them out as I've got them, to make it much easier to build. We have 2 cross pieces, and if you set them so that the lugs face each other, and then the outer wheel bearings, again the 2 pieces laid out as they are there. So we'll do a dummy run first of all without the wheels. You'll see that on this one we've got a lug and a lug, but this lug is wider than that one. And again on here we've got a wide and a narrow slot, so it can't go in the wrong way. So take this one with the bearing facing towards the inside. You will slot into there. Take this one exactly the same. He will slot in to there. Have to fiddle it a little bit. Then we do the same with this one. And the same with that one. But when we do this, we've got to obviously put the wheels in between the bearings before we assemble that. So we'll now do that. So take him out, him out, him out, him out. Right, so load a wheel into the bearing, making sure the bearing face and the flange is on the inside. Drop him in, pick up the other one, load it over the wheel, drop him into the slots. That's that wheel in position, and the wheel does rotate. And we do exactly the same now with the other one. Flange on the inside, into the slots, flange on the inside, over the wheel, and down into the slots. Right, the next stage now is going to be to mount those to the top swivel plates. Right, these are the two top swivel plates. They're similar but not the same. So the overall dimensions are the same, but the detail of the cutouts is slightly different. On this one, we have some slots there and there, which are where the bearings go that the unit swivels on. And on the other one, the bearing where it swivels on are at 90 degrees. That's so that it makes the actual wagon itself stable. So that's the only difference. The actual underside with the wheel construction is the same for both bogies. So we'll now build up one of those bogies. I'm going to go with this one first of all. But before we mount the wheels to the swivel plate, we need to fix the bearing that the swivel plate rotates on and its keeper plates. So swivel plate you'll need one of the bearings. You need this part, which is circle with a cutout in it, or a hole right the way through. And you'll need a slightly oblong piece, which is the same shape as the engraving on there. So the first thing we do is to mount the bearing from the side that actually has the engraving side onto it. So slide the bearing across and down into the hole. And then you need to just put a very small smear of super glue just to locate that bearing in. Just let it run round a bit, not a lot. Just locates it. Around. I have to hold this one up, because if we put it down, because the bearing protrudes slightly, it'll punch itself out. So then with a small piece of tissue, just wipe off the excess glue. Right, so the next then part to fit is the keeper plate. You'll see this has a recess on one side but not the other, so I think it's fairly obvious which way it goes on. So it goes on over the top and fits over the bearing. So we'll glue that in position now. A little bit of super glue again, each end. Making sure the recess goes over the bearing. Line it up with the marks and push down firmly. And hold that for 10-15 seconds just for the super glue to go off. That's the bearing located in. May be beneficial to use a thicker super glue or a thinner glue, doesn't really matter. I've used the thin super glue. Right, so we've glued that in position. Now we have to fit the keeper on the other side, which is the circle with the cutout. Do a trowel fit. It should drop over the bearing and self-center itself. Make sure it's a nice good fit and it touches the surface all the way around. So we glue that one in position. Just smear of glue around the outside. And then drop him over the bearing and push down firmly. Again, wait 10-15 seconds for the glue to go off. Right, that's that part done. Right, having done that plate, while we're at it, we might as well do the other bogie the other side. So locate the other unit, one bearing, one square bit with a cutout, one round bit with a cutout, exactly the same as before. Place the bearing into the hole on the same side that's got the marking. And just a little bit of super glue. Hold the bearing in position. Just run around the edges. As we know, a capillary action will suck the glue down in underneath. There we go, that's quite nice. Again, a bit of tissue. Remove the excess glue. Now we're going to fit the cover, bit of glue, top and bottom. Locate it over the bearing as before, line it up with engraved marks and push down. Again, there's no reason why you shouldn't use a PVA glue for this, or a thick super glue, or the thin super glue. That's now glued in position. Turn him over, trial fit. It's going to go on there quite nicely. So we put some glue on this part, around the outside again. You can of course again use a PVA glue if you wish. Oops, that's not what we want to do. And I'll drop that onto there. We're getting in a mess here, but at least you're seeing it as it happens. So let's try again. Oh gosh, it's all gone to pot. Right, glue around the outside. Onto the bearing. I didn't drop it this time. And push. Squeeze it tight. There we have it. That's the other top swivel plate done. Right, we're now going to assemble the wheel assembly to the swivel plate. Now, this part of construction can be very frustrating, but we'll go. So lay the parts out as we have them here. And the way it goes is that we pick this part up and we do that with it, if that makes sense. And this one we pick up and do that with it. So that we have two lugs there and there. They go into there and there. And the lugs there and there will drop into those two wide areas there. And the same for the other side. It's probably best if I show you. So we'll just shift that one to one side. So we pick up this part, squeeze it tight and one finger underneath, and pick up the frame. You can see that everything should drop into place. There we go. So you can see exactly how that went in. So we now have to do the same on the other side. So again, we pick him up, rotate him, and drop him down as before we did the other side. And everything lines up nicely. So we can then gently put that down and move on to the next stage. Right, next job is to fit some more plates on each side, but before we do that, we just put a spot of oil into each bearing, so we can't get at it once we put the covers on. So gently tilt it, use a small amount of oil, just a little drop into each bearing. Sort of a 3-in-1 oil is more than adequate. Make sure you do both sides. There we go. So that's just oiled each side. Right, the fitment of the following part has been changed, and you will be shown to be fitting a piece which is this shape, but as you can see it now has a hole in it, where in the video that follows it shows no hole at all. This is a modification that allows for a slightly longer axle on different types of wheel sets. So this is a modification. You won't find any that don't have a hole. They'll all have holes. So it's flat on one side, lugs and lugs, absolutely identical, except it now has a hole. Thank you. Then we need to locate these parts, and if we lay them out as I've laid them out here, it'll go together quite nicely. We've got two big lugs which go down, and the kick lines up with that kick there. So we'll lower this one in first. That drops in quite nicely. Ditto with this one. That one drops in. Same with this one. And same with the fourth one there. Right, now we'll move on to the next section. Well, the next two parts we add will firm up the construction. So if you like to find these two parts, 4 slots in each of them, and a little lug on the bottom. That little lug goes into the big square hole there, and the 4 lugs sticking out go into there. So very carefully drop it down into the slot at the bottom and slide it in, then give it a little bit of a wiggle, and you'll find they all drop into place. Then do the same with the one on the other side. A little bit of a wiggle, and that's firmed it up immensely. Right, having got those in, now locate another 2 identical to the ones we had just now, 4 holes and a lug on the bottom. So again, we do exactly the same. Lug into the bottom, slide it up. Same on the other side, lug into the bottom, slide it up, push together. The next pair to locate have various little cuts and bits missing out of them, but again they fit in exactly the same way, except we don't have the 4 slots to slide it up, it just relies on the bottom lug. So there, doesn't matter which way around they go. That one will go into there, that one will go into there. So then we move on to the next 2 pieces. These are the ones with the spring engraving on. Now it's important these go around the right way. As you can see, there is a bit of engraving there, which is not visible on that side. So it needs to go in so that the engraving is facing outwards, if that makes sense. So holding it like that, with the engraving facing up, if we turn it and then drop it down in. We'll do exactly the same with this one. Set it so you can see the engraving, so it's not that side, it's that side. Slowly rotate it and drop it in. And we find the final 2 each side, final covers. Again, we have a plain side and an engraved side. We want to see the engraving outside. So again, position it as I'm holding it here, engraving up and then notch to the right, and then as we rotate it, we drop it down in, and we do the same with this one, rotate it and drop it down in. Right, once you've reached this point, you may find that you've got a small gap where I'm pointing to now there, and possibly one on that side as well. This is because the cutout I've made there is to take up any tolerances in the 5 pieces of 2mm MDF, because 2mm MDF doesn't always come as 2mm. In this case, each one is in fact exactly 2mm, so we have a gap, but sometimes they can be 2.1 or 2.15, so this gap would then be filled up. So having the gap is not a mistake, it's not a problem. Well, the next job is to hold all that in position while we glue it, and the best way to do that is the elastic band. If you have an elastic band that's quite a stretchy one, about 40-50 millimeters in diameter, that's more than adequate. So we need to stretch it out and pull it in so it goes around all the side structures. Hold it with your hammer and move it around, and there we have it. So that's our bogie held in position with the elastic bands. So the next job now is to make sure everything is down firmly and squared up. Right, now we've got an elastic band holding it together. Let's make sure everything is square. So taking a piece of track, carefully lift it up. Don't lift it by the swivel because that will just come off and leave the wheels behind. So just gently lift it by the axles, place it onto just a small piece of track. You won't be able to move it along because the elastic bands are on the wheels, but just push down firmly and there shouldn't be any rock there at all. And then grasping the sides, you gently pick it up, and now we're going to check that everything is square as it should be. So we look down from the spring side and we can move each of these frames in relation to each other. We're trying to make sure that there's a nice straight line running across. Again, just maneuver them around a little bit until you're happy that everything is lined up. Again, looking into this area here, you should see a nice straight line all the way down, and make sure they're pushed firmly up into the slots on the top swivel plate. So double check this quite a few times, because what we're about to do next is finalize the position of all these parts, and obviously we want it looking neat and tidy. So that now to me looks okay. I'm happy with that. Make sure everything's firmly clicked down in. Yep, that's good. Alright, so again, not holding it by the swivel plate, but holding it underneath. Gently put it down. Make sure that these are all pushed up here firmly. And we'll move on to the gluing section. Right, with the bogie upside down, and we're happy with everything aligned as it should be, we're now going to glue the sides together. This is best done with a thin super glue, and just sort of smear it over the edges. I use a paper clip bent up. Just wipe it backwards and forwards. Fairly gentle with it because this is only held together by an elastic band at the moment. The glue will find its way down in between. I'll rotate it gently. I do the other side. And then back round again, and then using a tissue very gently, by holding those, just gently wipe off the excess. Just brush over the top and do the same for the other side. And that completes that little bit of gluing. Next part is the area where the wheels are. Again, just a smear. Doesn't need too much. Be careful near the wheel. We don't want it going down into the bearing. If we turn around and just do the other side. As before, work it up and down a bit. Again, wipe off the excess. Right, having done the gluing, I've now finished it. So we've glued that, and that surfaces. We now have to glue down into all the joints that you can see. So we start off by using the runny super glue, just putting it down into those joints. And where the tangs stick through the square holes there, rub a bit of super glue over there. Do the same for the other side. And again, just where the tangs stick through, the glue will soak in. And along the bottom edge, you can see where I'm doing. And we do the same on the other side. We can continue gluing down each corner. Down to the very bottom. Again, over where it just protrudes through. Don't worry about these other 4 holes. They're used for building the 45mm one. And then just down in the bottom, just see where I'm going, just where it joins the swivel plate. Hopefully you can see that. Right, then we turn it over. And the next place to glue are there and there. Don't touch any of the other places yet. So just put a little bit of super glue onto the top, just work it in. A little bit more there. So it soaks down in. Do the same on the other side. Whoops, a daisy. And wipe the excess off with a tissue. And we're ready to move on to the next section. Right, it's now time to add glue to the top halves. So we already glued in the 6 positions there. We're now going to glue there and there and there and there. So again, using the thin super glue, a sort of dollop, smear it around. Just like soaks down between the layers. Should do that in all 4 locations. I'll take a piece of tissue again. So remove the excess. can now leave that for about 20 seconds. Meanwhile, go and find a piece of test track. So we have our piece of test track. Can now remove the elastic band. And the wheels obviously rotate. Put it on our piece of test track. Should run smoothly. And there should be no rock side to side, which there isn't. And very, very gently runs very smoothly. So to fit the axle box covers, the way I tend to do it is to add a little bit of glue, normally the thick one, just put a small drop there, and then push the knife into the axle box cover, gently put it on top till it lines up with the markings underneath, and there we are, it's fixed. And then we do exactly the same with the final cover. A very small amount of super glue in the center of the circle, and then knife down in, and then very carefully line up with the circle, touch down, knife away, and that's located in position. Now I do that with a magnifying glass, so you do it if you've got good eyesight, or use a magnifying glass as I do. Now this obviously could have been done before this piece is fitted. Working down on a flat surface, it's entirely up to you which way you do it. When you come back, I've done all four sides. Right, I've now fitted the axle box covers on both sides, and of course meanwhile I've also been building up the other bogie. Both bogies are identical underneath. It's the tops that are different where we're going to fit the actual rotation bearings. On one of them you'll see there's a bearing fits there and there. On the other bogie it's at 90 degrees to it. So we'll deal with this bogie first. So we're now going to fit the bearings into this particular location. So the parts you'll need. Right, so these are going to fit the rotation bearings, but before we do that, it may be a good idea for you to rewind the video and to build up the second bogie in exactly the same way, as the underframe is identical. So you'll obviously end up with two bogies, as I have here, which are effectively the same underside, but just different on the top assembly. So if you'd like to do that, then we will move on to fitting the rotation bearings. Right, to assemble the top bearing you'll need two short shafts, two bearings, 8 keepers and 4 washers. It does go together quite simple. Take a short shaft, slide a bearing over it, put a washer each end, take a keeper, slide it on, another one, slide it on, do the same for the other side. As you can see now, and then that locates like that. You can't get it the wrong way round because the flange of the bearing fits into the cutout there. So you drop him down in, should fit snugly down. Make sure the tangs are pushed down firmly and not up at an angle. Then with it pushed down firmly, push the axle across until it touches the inner round part there. Turn him round and do exactly the same on the other side. Through the bearing, a washer on one side, washer on the other side, keeper and a keeper plate, turn him round, keeper plate, and a keeper plate, and again load him down on. Make sure that the shaft is pushed back and doesn't hit that on the way down. Flange goes to the bigger side there, drop him down in, make sure he's located down firmly, push the shaft back in so it touches there. So that's both the rotation bearings in. Give them a little spin with your fingers, make sure they rotate. Now we have to glue those into position. When we've got those in position, we're now going to glue those in. So using the Ready super glue, just put a little dollop at each end, just enough to locate it, while keeping a bit of firm pressure down on top. Make sure they're still down in the holes. Work your way round. Make sure they're pushed down firmly, bearing still rotates, and put that aside for a couple of minutes to dry. Meanwhile, we can carry on and do the other one. Right, so we've done the rotation bearings on one bogie, now we're going to do the same on the other bogie. So take your axle, slide your bearing in, washer, second washer, keeper plate, turn it round, keeper plate, flange goes to the outside so it lines up. Make sure the axle is pushed back through so it's nearly flush, it doesn't interfere when it goes in. Drop him down on, locate him in, push down firmly, push the axle back in so it touches the inner rotating bit there. Make sure the bearing rotates. Turn him round, and we'll do the other side. Take your short axle, bearing, washer on the other side, keeper plate, second keeper plate, turn it round, next keeper plate, and the fourth one. Push the axle back so it's flush. Flange on the bearing, lines up with the outside there. Drop him down in. Push the axle back so it touches the inside. And we can glue this one up. Again, keeping a bit of pressure, glue around each end, bit of pressure down on top, and that's that bogie with the bearings held in place. So put that one to one side, bring in the first one you did where the glue is now dried thoroughly. Right, now we can finish gluing all the top surface. So we have to go around and glue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 positions. So we just smear a bit into each one so it soaks down through. And take a tissue, just wipe off the excess. Then we need to go around, and where the shaft sticks through, just put some super glue just to hold the shaft in position to stop it sliding out. Do the same on the other side. There we go. So we've now glued everything down, so we can now do the same on the other one. So I'll just go through that one. Exactly the same. So we glue up where the parts protrude through. As before, a little bit of tissue, wipe off the excess. Right, back to the first one, and we need to do a little bit of lubrication into the bearings. So we just go in with a little bit of oil. We do this last of all because we don't want to get any oil onto any surface that we're going to be gluing. Give the bearing a spin. And yes, I forgot on this one, if I can just bear with me a moment. What I forgot to do on this one was to put some super glue around the shaft to hold it in place. It's a tight fit, but a bit of glue does help. Right, so that completes the gluing side really of the Bogie. Now the principle behind the way these bearings works are, this piece of acrylic, which we've already previously fitted to the actual frame itself, so that's up inside the frame, so when the Bogie is then fitted, it actually sits on those bearings there, such that the Bogie can rotate, and as it does, the bearings rotate. Obviously in this position we can't go left and right, but we can go up and down, so that gives the movement in that direction. And then if we bring in the other bogie, because the bearings are at 90 degrees to this one, again we still have the same facility to rotate, but in this case it can't go that direction, but it can rotate in that direction. So that means the actual low loader itself is very, very stable. That's the principle of the bearing system. There's one other bearing that does need to be lubricated, and that's the bearing we fitted down in the middle. Again, go in with a small bit of oil, just a little squirt down in where the balls are, and do the same on this one. A few seconds just to soak in, so that's more than adequate. So having got our oil into the bearing, take one of the brass bolts, slot it in from underneath, pull it up tight, and just to rotate the bearing to get the oil moving around. And if we do that the same on the other one we did, again slot the bolt up in, pull it firmly, rotate the bolt a few times, again just move the oil around. So there we have it. So that's our 2 bogies completed. Right, for this next exercise you need both bogies, 2 bolts, 4 nuts, 2 springs, and the chassis or main structure which we built earlier on. I'll just zoom back a bit so it all fits in. So those are the parts we're going to need. Now if you haven't already done it, now is also a good idea to lubricate the bearings in each end with the main unit. And again we do it the same way that we did the bogies. I'll try and bring it up so you can see what I'm doing. Hang on a minute. Right, okay, what we're trying to do is trying to get some oil down into that particular area there, which is where the balls live. So I'll just give it a little squirt. You can see it running around a little bit. And then we'll do the same with the other one. I think it's in focus for you. Again, we do the same as what we did with the bogie. Drop a bolt in and just spin it from underneath to get the lubrication moving into the balls. We'll turn around and we'll do the same on the other end. Right, that's got that moving. Right, now we'll zoom back out so we can see what we're doing. Right. On the back you can see there's the disc that we were talking about before that the actual bearings will run on. So to assemble it we add a bolt through the back, put your finger on it and hold it tight. Take a bogie, doesn't matter which one, and drop him down onto the bearing. So the bolt comes through. Then add the spring, which will stick, more or less should line up with the bottom of the bolt, so you can just get the nut on. So as I was saying, bolt through, drop the bogie on, drop your little spring over the bolt, put a nut on. It's a bit finicky. If you've got small fingers you're okay. If not, you've got a problem, you'll use a pair of pliers. That didn't work very well, did it? Okay, so pair of pliers, hold the nut. I'm trying to do this while filming, which doesn't help. Push the bolt back a little bit so I can turn it from the back, and then while holding the nut on, rotate the bolt. There we go. Okay, that's good. Best thing to probably use here is a box spanner if you've got one. Failing that, long-winded method, or holding your finger on the bolt on the other side. Start to tighten down onto the spring. Right, so the question would be is how tight you do the nut, was how long is a piece of string. It's quite a simple way of doing it. You keep tightening the nut until you can just rotate it. It just springs back on its own, and ditto going the other way as well. So the spring has just got enough tension to bring it upright because of the play in the bearings, and is obviously tight enough to hold it firmly down onto the body, such that you should be able to obviously rock it that way, but there'll be no rock in that direction. So then we do exactly the same. Now, before we do that, what we then got to add is the second nut down onto the first to lock that in position. So we use the two nuts to lock each other. The size of the thread I use is a 5BA, because that's a very nice fit through a 1/8 inch bearing. But unfortunately I was unable to source any 5BA lock nuts, nylon lock nuts. So we have to use two brass nuts and just lock them to each other. And there you have your now completed model. All that's now left to fit is you have to fit the buffer at each end, and then drop on the covers that cover up the bolt head. Now you use a little bit of double-sided tape just to hold these in, because you may need access to them at a later date. And we fit the one the other end. Now the advantage of a Bogie system is that some people I know run on 32 and 45 visiting different layouts. So there's no reason why you shouldn't purchase either a 32 or a 45 and then purchase a set of separate bogies and change them depending on which layout you're going to, where the bodywork would stay exactly the same. Obviously the Bogie kits are available as a separate item.